It is just before dawn at the Guyana Space Center. Engineers watch their screens as the countdown approaches. The world's largest and most powerful space telescope is about to launch. The James Webb Space Telescope is the result of decades of work and collaboration between 14 nations. A mission designed to look back through time, to witness the first stars and galaxies formed after the Big Bang, the moment known as the cosmic dawn. Success will redefine our understanding of the universe. Failure would end an era of grand exploration. Decades earlier, a young scientist named John Mather became fascinated by the origins of the cosmos. His father was a researcher who studied dairy science, but curiosity about how life and the universe worked filled their home. As a child, Mather read Galileo and Darwin and began asking questions about how everything began. That curiosity led him to study the faint radiation left over from the Big Bang, a discovery that earned him the Nobel Prize. In 1996, Mather approached colleagues with an idea to design a new space telescope capable of seeing the first galaxies ever born. They called it the Next Generation Space Telescope. The idea was simple in theory, but almost impossible in practice. To build a telescope 100 times more powerful than Hubble, sensitive to the faint infrared light of the early universe. Each telescope NASA built had opened a new window on the universe. Hubble showed us billions of galaxies, but it could not see the very first ones. To go further back in time, Webb needed to detect infrared light, the stretched glow of ancient galaxies moving away as the universe expands. To do that, the telescope had to be colder than any observatory ever launched. Infrared astronomy depends on extreme cold because even a warm telescope emits its own infrared light, blinding itself. Webb would need to chill to just 45 degrees above absolute zero. Unlike Hubble, which orbited close to Earth and could be repaired by astronauts, Webb would travel to a point 1,000,000 miles away called L2, where the gravity of the Earth and Sun balance perfectly. From that position, the telescope could always face deep space while a massive sun shield blocked heat and light from the Sun and Earth. At that distance, no one could fix it. Everything had to work flawlessly on the first try. The telescope was divided into 3 main sections. The first was the optical system, made up of 18 hexagonal mirrors coated in gold to reflect infrared light with high precision. The second was the spacecraft bus, containing the computer, power systems, and propulsion that kept Webb operating. The third was the sun shield, a multi-layered film structure the size of a tennis court. Its 5 layers, each thinner than a human hair, would block 200,000 watts of sunlight and allow only 0.2 of a watt to reach the telescope. The design had to fold to fit inside a 5-meter rocket fairing, then unfold perfectly in space to a width of 21 meters. The entire observatory needed to be lighter than Hubble, but 7 times more powerful. To make that possible, engineers would have to invent new materials, new mechanisms, and new methods of testing. The mirror material became one of the biggest challenges. After years of research, engineers chose beryllium, element number 4 on the periodic table, for its strength, low weight, and stability in extreme cold. Each mirror segment began as a 500-pound block of beryllium mined from ancient volcanic deposits. It was machined down to about 50 pounds, honeycombed from behind for strength, and polished to nanometer accuracy. Because the metal changes shape when cooled, the mirrors were polished to the wrong shape on Earth, so that once they reached space temperatures, they would shift into perfect alignment. Each mirror was then coated with an extremely thin layer of pure gold, chosen for its ability to reflect infrared light better than any other metal. By the early 2000s, the design had matured, and NASA renamed the project in honor of James E. Webb, the administrator who led the Apollo program. The James Webb Space Telescope became NASA's next great mission, but progress was slow. Every component had to be built from scratch. Each system had to be tested to survive launch and work in the vacuum of space without any chance of repair. Inside NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, technicians worked in the largest clean room of its kind, assembling mirrors and instruments in total silence. Even a single speck of dust could cause failure. Engineers wore white suits, gloves, and masks. Removing the mirror covers was done by hand, with precision movements rehearsed hundreds of times. When the mirrors were complete, the telescope underwent vibration and acoustic testing to simulate the violent forces of launch. During one test, sensors detected a loud pop. The system automatically shut down. Engineers feared the worst. They inspected the telescope, crawling beneath its structure, searching for signs of damage. Nothing appeared broken. After investigation, they discovered that the sound came from a latch mechanism that had chattered under certain frequencies. A false alarm that nonetheless reminded everyone of how delicate the mission was. Every detail mattered. Even the smallest imperfection could destroy decades of work. The entire observatory would endure temperatures hundreds of degrees apart. The hot side facing the sun at over 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and the cold side near absolute zero. The sunshield had to hold that thermal boundary, blocking heat as if it were sunscreen with an SPF of 10 million. Engineers folded and refolded it like origami, practicing deployment again and again, knowing that once it was in space, it had to unfold exactly right the first time. As development continued, so did the pressure. The telescope's cost rose and its schedule stretched over decades. Some argued it was too ambitious. Lawmakers questioned whether NASA could ever finish it. Scientists defended the project, calling it humanity's best chance to see its own beginnings. Inside the team, the engineers pushed forward. They knew that the next window on the universe was waiting, and that failure would close it for a generation. The James Webb Space Telescope was not only an engineering experiment, it was a test of human persistence. It represented thousands of people across 14 countries, all bound by a single purpose: to build a machine that could see the first light ever created. They faced technical setbacks, budget crises, and near cancellations. Yet the project endured because of one simple reason: curiosity. Humanity's desire to understand where we came from and what came before the first sunrise. As the years passed, the structure began to take shape. The mirrors gleamed gold under the clean room lights. The sunshield layers shimmered like silk. Slowly, the impossible machine was becoming real. Scientists looked at it not just as a telescope, but as a time machine, a way to see 13.5 billion years into the past, to glimpse the moment when the first stars ignited and the universe's darkness gave way to light. At last, after decades of invention, testing, and setbacks, the telescope stood complete, folded, secured, and ready to begin its journey from Earth to a place beyond the reach of human hands. This was no longer just an instrument. It was humanity's mirror, built to catch the light of our own beginnings. By the time the James Webb Space Telescope neared completion, it had already tested the limits of science, engineering, and human patience. 25 years had passed since its conception. Many of the engineers who began the project had grown gray or retired. Some had passed away before ever seeing their work fly. For those who remained, Webb had become more than a mission. It was a part of their lives, a commitment they refused to abandon, no matter how many delays or failures they faced. The challenges of building such a machine were unlike anything NASA had ever attempted. The telescope had to be lighter than Hubble, yet larger, more delicate, yet stronger, and capable of unfolding itself in the vacuum of space with no human touch. It required 344 potential single points of failure, each one a component that, if it malfunctioned, would end the mission entirely. Nearly 300 of those failures were tied to the telescope's deployment sequence. Every screw, latch, and wire had to perform perfectly. The team called the project the Impossible Machine. They knew how close the margin was between triumph and disaster. One broken hinge, one jammed latch, one tear in the sun shield, and the entire telescope would become a 6-ton monument to failure, drifting in silence a million miles from Earth. The mirror's 18 segments were finally completed and polished to perfection. Now they needed to be tested together as a single system. Webb's optical structure, with its mirrors and instruments, was built at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. Once assembled, it was transported to Houston, Texas, to be tested in a massive vacuum chamber originally built for the Apollo program. The chamber was known as Chamber A, a 40-foot steel cylinder capable of simulating the frigid emptiness of space. For the first time, the entire telescope would be cooled to minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit and tested as a complete system. Engineers watched from control rooms as the temperature dropped day by day. It took a month to cool the telescope to its operating temperature. Inside the dark chamber, the mirrors contracted and stabilized. It was the first moment Webb truly became a telescope. But then, nature intervened. Outside, a tropical storm began forming in the Gulf of Mexico. Within days, it intensified into Hurricane Harvey, one of the most powerful storms ever to strike Texas. As floodwaters rose around the Johnson Space Center, engineers inside the control room refused to leave. They slept on air mattresses, sustained by emergency rations, determined to keep the telescope safe. The building shook as winds howled outside. For 5 days, the storm battered Houston. The team watched fuel supplies for the cooling system drop lower and lower. They had only 1 day of liquid nitrogen left to keep Webb cold. If the supply ran out, they would be forced to warm the telescope faster than ever tested, risking catastrophic damage. Roads were flooded, delivery trucks were stranded, and every route to the Space Center was impassable. Then, at the last possible hour, a convoy of nitrogen tankers appeared on camera, arriving through flooded streets. The control room erupted in applause. Webb had survived both the vacuum of space and the fury of Earth. When the chamber finally reopened, the telescope's golden mirrors gleamed against the pitch-black walls. But, to the engineers' dismay, the mirrors were covered in fine dust and residue from decades of previous tests. Cleaning them was an agonizing process. A single scratch could end the mission. Technicians lay flat beneath the mirrors, inch by inch brushing them with special tools and isopropyl alcohol, restoring their flawless surfaces. For 10 days they worked in silence, knowing each stroke prepared the telescope to capture the first light of the universe. The telescope's optical success was only part of the story. The most difficult challenge was the sun shield, 5 thin layers of reflective film that had to deploy perfectly in space. Each layer was as thin as a human hair, each one cut, folded, and tensioned with surgical accuracy. During testing, even the tiniest mistake could rip a sheet or create wrinkles that might cause it to tear in orbit. The sun shield was a nightmare of geometry and precision. More than 100 release mechanisms held it in place during launch. Once in space, those mechanisms had to release in exact sequence, allowing the shield to unfold smoothly. There was no manual reset. If one of the 107 releases failed, the entire telescope would be useless. The engineers designed and tested each latch for years, yet they knew that in space they would only get one attempt. The design also faced repeated scrutiny from outside. In congressional hearings, lawmakers questioned NASA's management and rising costs. Some called Webb a symbol of bureaucratic failure. The mission's price tag had swelled from $500 million to over $10 billion. At several points, Congress threatened to cancel the project entirely. Scientists from around the world pleaded with them to continue. Webb was more than an experiment. It was humanity's only chance to see the dawn of time. Inside the program, morale fluctuated between hope and despair. Engineers worked under immense pressure, knowing that every decision carried historic weight. Many called the project a family, bound together by years of struggle and shared purpose. They fought, they argued, and they supported each other through stress and exhaustion. When budgets were cut, they found ways to continue. When critics attacked, they closed ranks. The harder the opposition pushed, the stronger their unity became. Technicians called the telescope "our child." One engineer began working on Webb when his son was born. 28 years later, his son had a master's degree, and the telescope was finally nearing launch. Time had passed, but the mission had endured. As testing continued, Webb faced one more challenge. During final assembly, small hardware failures caused screws and washers to come loose near the delicate sun shield membranes. Even a single loose part could puncture the thin film. The issue delayed the project for nearly a year, but it revealed the brutal truth of spacecraft design. One unnoticed detail could destroy decades of progress. Every setback made the team more cautious. Every delay taught them something vital. Over the years, hundreds of tests proved that the telescope could deploy, cool, and operate as designed. Finally, the time came to ship it from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center to its launch site in French Guiana. The telescope was sealed inside a custom-built container that functioned as a mobile clean room. Moving a 6-ton observatory across land and sea required extraordinary coordination. Each mirror was worth millions of dollars. The engineers avoided thinking about its value. They focused only on the task: deliver it safely. For weeks, Webb traveled slowly by ship, guarded in secrecy to avoid interference or piracy. Amateur observers tracked its progress online, but NASA kept the true route confidential. The journey ended on the coast of South America at the Guiana Space Center, a launch site near the equator chosen for its ability to give rockets an extra boost from Earth's rotation. Months of final testing followed. The sun shield was unfolded one last time for inspection. It would never open again on Earth. As technicians worked beneath its shimmering layers, one of them removed a protective lens cap from the telescope's sensors. The moment was quiet, almost sacred. After 25 years of work, this was the last time any human would ever touch or see the telescope's golden mirrors. The technician said nothing, but later admitted it was one of the most emotional moments of his career. The telescope felt alive, like something preparing to awaken. Then the world changed. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic forced global shutdowns. For a moment, it seemed that Webb might be delayed indefinitely. Travel restrictions separated teams and manufacturing slowed. Yet a small group of engineers continued, working in isolation, masked and cautious. They knew that if the project stopped completely, it might never restart. Their persistence kept the mission alive through the worst of the crisis. By the end of 2021, Webb was ready. Fully assembled, tested, and fueled, it stood at the center of the Guyana Space Center, folded inside the nose of an Ariane 5 rocket. Every cable, every sensor, every motor had been verified. Decades of invention had come down to this single machine, this one launch. As Christmas approached, poor weather delayed liftoff. The final launch date fell on December 25th, 2021, a coincidence that seemed fitting. On the night before launch, engineers gathered in the control room. Some had been on the project since its beginning. They knew that the next day, their life's work would either succeed or vanish forever. Outside, rain poured over the jungle. The rocket stood tall on the pad, bathed in floodlights, its silver fairing gleaming against the dark sky. Beneath that shell rested humanity's most ambitious scientific instrument. Inside the control room, flight directors performed the final checks. Each system was green. Fueling was complete. For a few seconds, everyone was silent. Then came the call. All systems go. At 7:20 a.m. local time, the engines ignited. The ground trembled as the Ariane 5 lifted through the clouds, its flame reflecting off the Atlantic. For the people who had worked on Webb, it was not just a launch. It was the culmination of half a lifetime. Many wept as they watched the rocket disappear into the sky. In those moments, there was no politics, no pressure, no noise, only awe. The telescope had finally left Earth, carrying with it a quarter-century of human hope and ambition. The James Webb Space Telescope was on its way to the edge of time itself. The morning sky above French Guiana was still gray when the rocket carrying the James Webb Space Telescope disappeared into the clouds. On the monitors in mission control, a small dot separated from the launch vehicle and began its silent journey outward. For those who had devoted decades to this mission, the hardest part was just beginning. Webb was now on its own. Unlike any telescope before it, Webb had to assemble itself in the vacuum of space. Over the next month, it would unfold hundreds of mechanisms, deploy antennas, extend its mirrors, and stretch a sunshield the size of a tennis court. Every step carried the risk of total failure. There would be no astronauts to fix it, no rescue mission, no second chance. Flight controllers watched telemetry data from 1,000,000 miles away, their eyes moving between screens as each motor, latch, and cable performed exactly as planned. Commands were sent in sequences that took 16 seconds to travel across the void. Every movement of the telescope took hours, sometimes days. There was no rushing perfection. As the days passed, the first stage of deployment began. The solar panels extended, powering the spacecraft. Then the antenna unfolded, allowing communication with Earth. Each confirmation brought sighs of relief, but the most dangerous part was still ahead: the deployment of the Sun Shield. The Sun Shield was a masterpiece of engineering and one of the riskiest mechanisms ever attempted in space. 5 ultra-thin layers of film had to unfold and stretch without snagging or tearing. If a single layer failed to separate correctly, the telescope would overheat and become blind. Engineers held their breath as the command was sent. Motors whirred, cables pulled, and slowly, like a flower opening in slow motion, the silver sheets unfurled. Days later, all 5 layers were in perfect position, reflecting sunlight away from the cold, golden mirrors above. For the first time, Webb was in shadow. With the Sun Shield deployed, attention turned to the mirrors. The secondary mirror swung forward on 3 delicate arms, locking into place. Then the primary mirror, made of 18 hexagonal segments, began its long, careful alignment. Each mirror was moved by motors finer than a human hair. Over several weeks, the mirrors aligned into a single surface, focusing light with precision unmatched in human history. When the final latch locked and the mirror reflected its first star, Mission Control erupted in applause. After 25 years of labor, the telescope was alive. From Earth, Webb now appeared only as a faint glimmer moving across the darkness, 1 million miles away. Its sensors cooled to their final temperatures, just 7 degrees above absolute zero for its coldest instruments. Engineers began powering up the cameras and spectrometers that would transform faint starlight into images and data. The first target was a bright star used for calibration. It was never meant to be beautiful, only useful. But when the first image came through, a gasp filled the control room. Against the star's brilliant light were hundreds of faint shapes, galaxies, never before seen, scattered like jewels behind what was supposed to be an empty field. The telescope had accidentally captured the deep past of the universe in its very first test. Word spread quickly. Around the world, scientists who had spent their lives studying cosmic origins received the data with disbelief. Each faint spiral and dot represented entire galaxies billions of years old, their light traveling across time to reach Webb's mirror. Humanity had just seen deeper into the past than ever before. For John Mather and the original team, the moment was overwhelming. The telescope had worked perfectly. Every risk, every sleepless night, every near cancellation had been worth it. The impossible machine had done the impossible. Months later, NASA prepared to release Webb's first official images to the public. In July 2022, an audience gathered in anticipation. Across the world, millions of people watched live streams as scientists revealed the results. On screen appeared the deepest infrared image of the universe ever taken, a vast cluster of galaxies bending the light of others behind them through gravity itself. The crowd gasped. The image was both beautiful and humbling, a portrait of time stretching back over 13 billion years. The telescope's power was beyond anything predicted. It could detect galaxies that existed only a few 100 million years after the Big Bang, showing the universe's infancy with clarity never imagined. In every image, entire histories unfolded, stars forming in clouds of gas, galaxies colliding, black holes devouring light. Webb had become a time machine pointed at creation itself. Scientists began studying star-forming regions like the Carina Nebula, revealing newborn stars hidden behind veils of dust. Another image showed a dying star surrounded by glowing gas, captured in exquisite detail. One scientist compared it to watching the life cycle of the cosmos unfold in real time. Webb was not just seeing light, it was witnessing evolution. The telescope's instruments could also analyze the atmospheres of distant planets orbiting other stars. For the first time, astronomers could detect water vapor, methane, and carbon dioxide in worlds light years away. The data hinted that the building blocks of life were common throughout the galaxy. Suddenly, the search for other habitable worlds was not science fiction, but a real, measurable pursuit. For those who had worked on Webb, these discoveries carried a deep emotional weight. Many had dedicated their entire careers to this single mission. Watching the first images appear on screens, they saw not just stars and galaxies, but the reflection of human perseverance. Some cried quietly in the darkened control rooms, their faces lit by the glow of the universe. NASA's leadership celebrated the success as a moment for all of humanity. The telescope was not the triumph of one nation, but of thousands of people across the planet. Engineers, scientists, technicians, and dreamers who had refused to give up. In a world often divided, Webb had become a symbol of what humanity could achieve when united by curiosity and purpose. The data from the telescope began to flood research centers. Scientists processed images and spectra from across the cosmos, from galaxies born billions of years ago to planets orbiting nearby stars. Each discovery raised new questions. The more Webb revealed, the more mysterious the universe became. For astronomers, it was as if the universe had come alive again, each observation peeling back another layer of its story. The telescope's precision was so extreme that in one image meant to show a single star, scientists counted more than 200 faint galaxies in the background. Everywhere Webb looked, the universe was overflowing with light. At NASA's headquarters, the first public image release included speeches from scientists and administrators. They called it a turning point in human history, the moment we truly began to see our origins. When the first images appeared on giant screens, people gasped, applauded, and wept. The President of the United States described it as a new window into the soul of the cosmos. For the engineers watching remotely, those words carried personal meaning. They remembered the nights spent debugging systems, the hurricanes, the endless testing, and the quiet fear that it might all fail. But now, there it was, proof that their work had succeeded beyond expectation. Around the world, people who had never cared about astronomy found themselves captivated by Webb's images. The photos of distant galaxies appeared on news broadcasts, billboards, and social media. For a brief moment, humanity shared a collective sense of awe. It was a reminder that beyond politics, beyond divisions, there was something far greater. A universe vast, ancient, and still full of mysteries waiting to be discovered. Letters began to reach the Webb team from across the globe. One came from London. A man wrote about his father, an amateur astronomer with terminal cancer who spent his remaining nights following Webb's discoveries. Watching the telescope's progress had brought him peace. It reminded him why he fell in love with the stars. For the scientists reading those letters, it was a moment of quiet pride. Their work had touched lives in ways they could never have measured in data. For John Mather, the mission had come full circle. As a child, he wondered about infinity. As an adult, he had helped humanity see it. He often said that the universe never fails to surprise us, that nature is more imaginative than we are. And Webb had proven him right again. From the deep fields filled with galaxies to the spectra of alien atmospheres, Webb had revealed that the universe was richer and more dynamic than anyone had predicted. Every image it captured was a time capsule, each photon a messenger from the past. The telescope would continue to operate for decades, its instruments fueled by precision and silence. Scientists planned new targets, the formation of the first black holes, the chemistry of exoplanets, the birthplaces of stars. Webb had not just answered questions, it had opened millions more. For humanity, the telescope offered perspective. It showed that our story is written across the cosmos, that every atom on Earth once belonged to a star that lived and died long before our planet existed. Looking into the deep sky was not about escaping our world, but understanding our place within it. The engineers who built Webb often said that the telescope was more than a machine. It was a mirror reflecting human potential. Its golden surface captured the first light of the universe, and symbolically, the light of human curiosity that made it possible. As one scientist said during the final briefing, success was binary. It either worked or it didn't. There was no middle ground. But Webb had done more than work. It had changed the way we see ourselves. In the darkness of space, 1 million miles from home, the telescope drifted silently, its mirrors glowing faintly in the reflected sunlight. It stared into the ancient past, catching the faint glimmers of the first dawn, the birth of everything. And from that distant vantage point, it sent back not just images, but a message. That even in a universe of unimaginable scale, a small species on a small planet had found a way to look back at its own beginning and understand that it was part of something infinite. The James Webb Space Telescope had fulfilled its purpose. It had shown us the light that made us possible. And for the first time, humanity could see the dawn of the cosmos and know that the story was just beginning.